Yo, and we are live. What's happening with y'all? What's going on with the Cybercity family out here, man? How many people we got in here, man? Yo, hey, first of all, hats off to Vocab Malone. The Cybercity has been dope. It's been on time. Everybody's done a phenomenal job. You know what I'm saying? As I've been, changing diapers and dealing with, crazy kids and stuff, I've tried to catch as many of everybody's sessions as possible. It's sometimes harder than others, but hey, man, it's been dope, man. I see BK Apologies in the building, D New in the building, Lisa J, Servant of Christ Ministries. We got a lot of folks in here, man. So it's been dope, y'all. It's been dope. Now, for anybody who knows me, you guys know that I do not have the gift of being brief. You know what I mean? So I just finished doing a run through of my presentation. You know what I'm saying? I was up to old dark 30 working on it. And I was like really pushing my time. So I'm going to kind of cut out some of the preliminary stuff and just dig right in, y'all. You know what I'm saying? So, bear with me. I'm actually dealing with a new system in terms of how to do slides as well. So, we'll see how it turns out. But yeah, so, my name is Adam Coleman. This is the Tru-ID Apologetics channel. Y'all know what it is, man. We're all about loving God, loving people, and taking care of the things that God blesses us with. And our thing is here, man, we want to definitely equip saints, man, you'll be able to articulate the faith, you know what I'm saying? Understand the faith, first of all, you know what I'm saying? Understand the physics for the faith and being able to articulate it to others, So before I get started, just to make sure y'all can hear me, can y'all put some ones in the chat to make sure y'all can hear me and all that? I ain't gonna lie, man. We got a lot to cover, y'all. we got a lot to cover. So I'm gonna try to steam through it as much as possible. I'm trying to cover like 6 arguments in 2 minutes. Okay, y'all can hear me. All right, cool. That's what's up. All right. So yes, let's go ahead and get started. Let me move this over here. Put some 2s in there if you can still see me. I just did something to my screen. If you can still see me clear and see the and see the slides, let me know with the number 2. Is that cool? While y'all are doing that, I think some people actually might be confused why we're even doing a segment on Black atheism. I mean, to be honest with you, historically speaking, okay, cool, y'all can see me. Historically speaking, obviously, atheism is culturally out of step with the Black community. I mean, we don't really get down like that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna say who said it, but a homeboy might say that actually atheism is the real white man's religion. I think it's true. But y'all know what it is, man. We don't get down with atheism like that, you know what I'm saying, traditionally speaking. But the reality is, man, is that, we do have a number of folks who are trying to take up that mantle and, broaden the reach of atheism. And so we want to be prepared. Let me show this slide right here. We want to be prepared and equipped. You know what I'm saying? We've got a number of individuals in the community trying to push so-called Black atheism. You see some of them here. I think I got Anthony Pinn up there. I recently did a video about Aries Spears. He's saying he's kind of tinkering with it or whatever. So I put some question marks by his name just to be, for the sake of it. Mandisa Thomas. Some of these folks have actually made inroads on college campuses and all that, man. So this is not something that we can really overlook. We need to make sure that we're covering all bases as we're dealing with, the different worldviews that are combating the faith of Christianity here today. Also, I got Ta Nehisi Coates. A lot of y'all probably recognize his picture. Maybe you didn't know that he was an atheist, but he's certainly a professing atheist. He believes that God does not exist, and he's very firm on that. You know what I'm saying? And so he's one of those guys that's kind of made some inroads in the culture. It's kind of considered to be a thought leader in the Black community, and he comes from an atheistic perspective. So this is something that we definitely need to turn our attention on. Now, I want to say up front, I understand that there is a great deal of controversy, surrounding the term atheism in general. And folks, really classically defined, it's very simple. It refers to the belief or stance that there is no God or gods. It's classically defined. That's what atheism is. But nowadays, you have a lot of people who would rather reframe it as something as being like a lack of belief in God or gods, or believing there's not enough evidence, to substantiate there being a God and things of that nature. But also, folks may not know, but in addition to that, there's also what I call a more idiosyncratic use of the term Black atheism. That's basically about, not so much disavowing God in total, but rather denouncing God as represented in the Abrahamic faiths, So I take it, just for the sake of us being on the same page, I want to, get our, define our terms. Shout out to BK Apologist. He's real big on that. But, define our terms. I'm defining Black atheists as, somebody who's a continental African, or Africans of the diaspora who hold to a worldview, perspective, etc., which includes or implies the stance that the proposition or the statement that God exists is a false proposition or a false statement. They're saying that that statement God exists is false. And particularly, we're dealing with folks whose atheist perspective is flavored or characterized by the culture and concerns of those communities. So when I say Black atheists, I feel like that kind of puts you in the ballpark of where I'm coming from. Now, generally speaking, I got three streams of critique, if you will. I know I'm moving pretty quick, but I got some. Well, you'll see why in a minute. We got a lot of ground to cover. So I got three streams of critique. I would say. So I think that you have consequences to the atheistic worldview that fall in these three categories. In general, with the denial of God's existence, atheism simply gives a false depiction of the way the reality is. And there are implications to that. So that kind of takes it to my second and third point here, which is that, in doing so and giving a false depiction of the way reality is, atheism fails to account for the essential aspects of the human experience that one would need in order to navigate the moral complexities of our people's history, of African-American history, or history of African peoples in the Western world more broadly. And then thirdly to that, Black atheism can't provide a solid framework for morality and identity from which we could build and move forward as a community. Now, for the most part, I'm going to be focusing on that morality piece. But actually, I was up pretty late last night, tinkering with some things, and I've got an argument that I actually haven't taught on before. It'll be my first time giving it a shot. Oh shoot, what am I doing here? Sorry, bear with me, y'all. Got lost in my own slides. But it'll be my first time dealing with this particular argument from identity that I want to share with y'all. So hopefully we'll be able to kind of get to that. I'm gonna try my best. If not, then we'll have to do like a follow-up session. Maybe sometime this week, and we'll get there. So are we all on the same page so far? Are we good? Okay. Nate 2D. So I'll answer questions at the end. He said proposition. What does that mean? It's basically just a statement, or the content of a statement. You can put it that way. That's what a proposition is. Like the content of a statement. Okay. So let's dig in now to kind of set up this conversation. I want to play a quick clip from a video that I put out a couple weeks ago, just real quick to kind of set the stage for the rest of our discussion. All right. And here we go.
I've always been in a struggle with religion and God. I think I'm this close, if I'm not already there, to being a Black atheist. I haven't completely crossed over, but I'm like Anakin Skywalker. I'm so close to the dark side that I'm starting to feel like my faith in religion and humanity and what this all is supposed to mean is a bunch of bull. And I just don't understand how we as a people historically put so much faith into this thing called God, but yet for 400 years we were in chains. For 400 years we prayed. For 400 years, Black people have a saying in church where we go, the pastor comes out, he goes, God is good, ain't he? And we say all the time. All the time. God is good. All the time. 400 years, all the time. The 60s, all the time. The 4 Black girls that died in the church bombing in Alabama, all the time. The 9 Black people shot by Dylan Roof in church, praising God. You would think if the one place you are safe, a safety zone, is in his house, and if God and the angels can't protect you in his house all the time, give me some of the time, okay, but not all the time.
Setting this discussion off, man. Could y'all hear that? Okay, cool. It sounds like y'all could hear it. Everybody can hear it? Got you. So, with that being the case, what I'm saying? Matter of fact, let me get over to my next slide here to kind of frame where I'm going with this. All right.
I've always been in a...
There we go. Morality. I think if you really, listen to, what Eric Spears had to say there, I mean, I agree. I think Nate 2D says he's angry at God. I mean, I agree. And we get these kind of objections all the time. Where was Jesus during slavery? Why didn't God put a stop to this or put a stop to that? This or that bad thing or this or that evil thing happened. Why would God allow that? We get those kinds of objections all the time. And really it revolves around morality and things of that nature, So what I want to do is kind of unpack that a little bit. But before I do, I want to kind of just set the stage for we'll kind of maybe paint a broader picture of what it is I'm trying to achieve. So basically, this whole discussion is about what worldviews are meant to do. I'm saying worldviews are meant to give you a framework to navigate reality and the human experience in a robust and consistent way. And so what I'm arguing is that when it comes to these kinds of, issues of morality and these kind of things that we wrestle with in our human experience, Christianity can provide that sort of a framework to deal with that kind of thing, whereas atheism cannot provide a sufficient framework. And so really, when you look at the history of African people here in the West, you see like abolitionists, freedom fighters, civil rights activists, and so on, employing the biblical worldview in their argumentation, and so let me kind of bring up this next graphic. Okay. So you see, in our different, like I said, freedom fighters, abolitionists, and so on, they're employing the biblical worldview as they're, arguing for liberty, just basic human dignity, identity. They're arguing against injustice and so on and so forth. Right. And they're constantly, it's kind of like this house, they're making these different moral claims. And at the foundation of their argumentation, as we'll see in a minute, you often see that God is that foundation. And I think that's appropriate because I think, as I said, Christianity can provide a firm foundation for ethics and morality and so forth, right? But just like a house, right? If you take the foundation away from a house, if you remove the foundation, that house is going to collapse, right? That's what's going to happen. It's going to come crashing down. And likewise, when we look at the different arguments and the essentials of the human experience and morality that these different African freedom fighters, African-American freedom fighters are arguing for, if you remove that God foundation, then likewise, their foundation, their leverage for arguing towards liberty and so forth comes crashing down as well, right? So, that's kind of where we're going to go. I'm going to cite different authors. One thing I say to people all the time, and this is actually, I've said it in the past too, like sometimes, I feel like we don't have shoulders to stand on when it comes to African-American thought, philosophy, and so forth. I've said it several times. I was dead wrong. The fact is I hadn't done my homework. It's just that when we think about, if you really want to understand Black philosophy, I like to put it this way. Our philosophers were in the trenches. I'm saying, so if you want to understand Black philosophy, if you want to understand how we wrestle with, the existential issues of life, you've got to dig into the speeches of abolitionists. You got to go to the sermons, on that pulpit where preachers are grappling with these things. You got to, dig into slave narratives and all those kinds of sources. And so that's what I'll be drawing from. I'll be pulling different examples from sources like that, and just kind of showing, and in part of philosophical history a little bit in the African-American context, but then also showing how, the God, the biblical worldview provides a better foundation for ethics. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next slide here. All right. So just to kind of clear, so we're clear here, as our tools of discovery, if you will, I'll be using a number of what's called deductive arguments. Okay. So deductive arguments are tools that philosophers use to demonstrate that there's good reason to affirm something or accept that something is being true. Now, in terms of a format or structure to a deductive argument, basically you have a series of sentences where the first couple are what you call a premise. Each one is called a premise, or together they're called premises, right? Plural. And then you have at the end, you're going to have a conclusion. Okay. So the premises are supposed to kind of work together to support the conclusion. Now, you have a good argument on your hands, a good deductive argument on your hands, if each premise is more plausibly or more likely true than not. And then secondly, if that conclusion really flows from, those premises, then that you have a sound argument. I'm saying you've got a good piece of evidence to say, hey, this such and such is the case. I've come to a solid conclusion here. That's what you call a sound argument, right? So that's what we're going to be kind of, using a little bit, right? So let's just do a quick example, all right? Okay, pretty simple. Adam wears blue jeans every Saturday. Today is Saturday. Therefore, Adam is wearing, fill in the blank for me. What is Adam wearing today? Go ahead, throw it in the chat. Make sure it runs in. Might be a little bit delayed on the chat, but okay. Anybody gonna take a guess? There we go. Ralph B is the first one I saw. Jacob Brown too. Blue jeans, right? That's a basic deductive argument. I'm saying you see how it kind of flows a little bit. So that's like the format of the arguments that we're going to be appealing to. So Give me a second. Okay, we're doing good, man. We're making good time. All right. So looking back on what Aries Spears was talking about, right? He raises a number of different, moral issues that he considers to be problematic. Right? Such and such was wrong, or such and such was evil, right? Now, what do people mean when they say that, this or that was evil or wrong? Okay, let's take a look at that for a second. All right. Now, shout out to my man, John McCrae. Y'all see that, right? Y'all see what I did there? What do you mean? Shout out to my man, John McCrae. Y'all definitely subscribe to his channel as well. But when people talk about things being wrong, do they mean that from like a subjective standpoint, or are they talking about evil being wrong in an objective sort of way? Are they talking about subjective morality or objective morality? Okay. Now, subjective morality, I'm referring to the perspective where morals are just things that are basically things are either good, bad, right, or wrong, dependent upon what a person or group of people think about it or their stance on it, right? So, like if I say that chocolate ice cream is better than cookies and cream ice cream, that's subjective. If you disagree with me, then neither one of us are really wrong about that. It's just that we disagree. We have different preferences and opinions, right? So we're each expressing what's true for us. Now, of course, it wouldn't make sense for us to argue about it, try to impose our preferences on one another, because like I said, it's just a subjective opinion, right? Now, likewise, if morality is all subjective, then that means that by definition, everything that we hold to be true about what's good, bad, right, or wrong is really nothing more than just moral opinions or preferences, right? So if you believe that morality is all subjective, for example, then let's say you believe that slavery was wrong. Well, I mean, that's just your opinion. Those enslavers weren't really wrong. They just were, if anything, were out of step with your personal moral preferences, right? And hey, just like I'm not under any obligation to say, think that vanilla ice cream is best just because somebody else thinks so. Those enslavers were under no obligation to conform to the moral preferences of folks who didn't like what they did. That's really what it means if you got subjective morality. Now, if that's the basis of the kinds of objections that we're getting from people like Aries Spears, then obviously that's a pretty weak, foundation, right? I mean, your opinion is not firm grounds, in terms of an argument against Christianity. That's just your opinion, right? So I think when people talk about these things being wrong, like slavery, colonization, all these sorts of things, when they say those things were wrong or evil, they mean something stronger than that. I think it's obvious that when people bring these kind of things up, in order for the arguments to carry any weight, they've got to go a step further and take it that these things aren't just subjectively wrong, but they're objectively wrong. And by objectively wrong, I mean that something is wrong as just a fact of the matter, regardless of what any person thinks about it, regardless of their opinions or their stance on it. Wrong is wrong, just like 2 + 2 = 5 is wrong. That kind of wrong, right? So another way it might be to put it would be to say that if morality is objective, then there are moral facts, right? There are objective moral facts about what's good, bad, right, or wrong. Okay, so we're just laying a little bit of groundwork here. Now, here's the thing, just real quick. Many of the viewers might be familiar with this line of reasoning if you follow Frank Turek or Robert Zacharias. But if somebody's making a claim that, say, slavery is wrong, for example, if they're saying that it's objectively wrong, then we have an interesting issue that arises, because if there's a such thing as objective evil, then there must be such a thing as objective good. And if there's such a thing as objective good and objective evil, then there must be an objective moral law by which to differentiate between good and evil. But then if there is an objective moral law, then it's reasonable to say that, hey, that suggests there must be a moral law giver, which, by the way, that's who we refer to as God in the biblical worldview, right? Now, much more can be said about that in terms of, that pathway to engaging people. But I really want to flesh this argument out. And so let me quickly, we're going to get to our next slide here. But before I do that, let me just check it in. Are we doing okay, y'all? Everybody with me so far? Is this making any kind of sense, or am I just kind of babbling here? What am I doing? Yeah, hit that like button. Yeah, appreciate it. Smash the like button. Actually, Mr. Phil Fox said, definitely. So let's keep it moving here. All right. So now I want to get to some quotations here. All right. Okay. This is the fun part. We're gonna get to our first quote. Now, this is from one of my all-time favorites, my man Martin DeLaney. Okay. Now, Martin DeLaney is a fantastic guy. I mean, he was an abolitionist. He actually worked hand in hand with Frederick Douglass, as a matter of fact, in their publication of the North Star, which is an abolitionist publication. And he wasn't no joke, man. He actually fought in the Civil War and everything, man. He was about that life. You test him if you want to. He wasn't playing. It was interesting. He's actually considered to be one of the forefathers of Pan-Africanism as well. As a matter of fact, if there was like a Mount Rushmore of Pan-Africanists, this guy right here would definitely be, in that number on the Mount Rushmore of Pan-Africanists. He's considered to be a forefather of it. Now, he wrote a book called The Condition, Elevation, Immigration, and Destiny of Colored People of the United States. It's a pretty long title. He's a man after my own heart. I'm saying he's long-winded. I can dig that, Now, in that book, he's detailing how the Black community could flourish and move forward. And it's interesting. In chapter 4 of his book, he's breaking down how God operates and how he structured the world, right? And here's a quote from it. He says, God's means, meaning the way that God does things, God's means are laws, fixed laws of nature, a part of his own being, and as immutable and as unchangeable as himself. Nothing can be accomplished but through the medium of and conformable to these laws. And I'm not going to read the whole quote. I'm going to leave it up here for a second so people can travel back to it. I'm just hitting some highlights. It's interesting that he notes that there's a moral law. He said that which is moral through the medium of moral law. That's one of the types of laws that he names. He names a spiritual law, moral law, and physical laws. And so he's saying that God, going back to that moral law, he mentions the moral law as being grounded, or basically God is the foundation of the moral law. It's part of his nature. It's part of him himself, unchangeable, immutable, and so forth. Now, what's fascinating really is that that's an entirely biblical perspective. And just consider these passages right here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just think about 1 John 1:5. It says, now this is the message we have heard from him and declared to you. God is light, and there is absolutely no darkness in him. Now, notice it says that God is light. It doesn't just say that he has light, right? It says that he is light. And light in this passage, if you break it down, is being used as basically a word to say, refer to like glory, goodness, righteousness, truth, and things of that nature. It said God is those things. Okay. Likewise, in 1 John 4:8, it talks about how God is love. I'm saying God is love. It's not just that he's loving, God is love, right? James 1:17, you could talk about that, how, God, doesn't change like shifting shadows as well. So ultimately, the scriptures affirm what Martin DeLaney is trying to articulate, which is that God himself is the essence, foundation, and standard of goodness. He's the essence of it. I'm saying, like, God is good, not in the sense that, he's well behaved. I'm saying he's what it means to be good. He's the very definition and essence of it. Okay. So with that being said, what if we take God out of the picture, right? If we take God out of the picture, we remove that foundation that Martin DeLaney alluded to, what objective basis remains for morality? Or to be more specific, what if there's no God, what objective basis remains for moral values and duties, right? All right, so now I've introduced two more buzzwords that we got to cover and lay some groundwork. And I promise we'll kind of move more swiftly after we kind of get this in place. So I talked about moral values and moral duties, right? There's my man John McCrae again. He's showing up again, man. I need to get this man out of my PowerPoint. What's up with that? All right, oh shoot, I'm having trouble bringing up. Oh, there we go. Excuse me. Okay, so when philosophers refer to moral values, they're talking about things that one might categorize as being either good or evil. So, for example, like love, justice, and fairness. These things are virtues; they're goods, right? Whereas on the other hand, like malice, injustice, unfairness, these things are considered to be evil. That's what you're talking about when you're dealing with moral values, right? On the other hand, we're talking about moral duties. Right. We're talking about do's and don'ts. I'm saying moral duties have to do with whether something is right or wrong. I'm saying, or whether you've basically, what should you do in any given instance, or what are you morally obligated to do? That's what moral duties have to do with. Right. OK, so just laying that out real quick, taking into account Martin DeLaney's statement about God himself being the foundation of the moral law. We can take a look at our first argument, which is the moral argument for God's existence. And we're making good time, so I think we're going to be able to make it through everything I wanted to cover. I know I got a couple minutes here, but it's looking pretty good for us, y'all. So that's good news. The moral argument for God's existence. Let's go to that right quick. If God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. That's premise one. Premise two: objective moral values and duties do exist. Therefore, God exists. That's our conclusion there. Okay. Now, what reasons can we give in defense of the first two of the two premises to kind of get us to that conclusion right quick? All right. Now, first of all, the gist of all this is that if you're trying to ground morality in the natural world, basically taking God out of it, then you're basically going to take an L. So you're gonna have an uphill battle. So when you think about Genesis, God, in the beginning, God, right? He creates the world. He creates man. He says that man is good. He's throughout the scriptures, he's laying down commands of how we ought to treat each other, how we ought to value each other. Man is made in the image of God, and that carries with it some inherent dignity and so forth. So right there, you see in the scriptures, God, being the foundation throughout the text of what morality is all about, right? But let's say again, if you take God out of the picture, then we run into a problem, right? One of the most common ways that we gain self-understanding is to consider where we come from. So for atheists who see reality in strictly natural terms, that we're just basically matter, physical stuff, we can ask the question, what does the story of matter tell us about moral worth and objective values and objective duties, right? Now, if the Big Bang is where it all began, some 14 billion years ago, whatever, basically matter, energy, space, time just kind of popped into existence from nothing, for nothing, and by nothing, right? Now, obviously, it should go without saying that nothingness can't have intentions. I'm saying there were no plans laid in terms of how we ought to treat each other, and there was no value assigned to us by nothingness. It's just nothingness, right? So if that's the case, then already we've started out on the wrong foot, looking for moral values and duties by looking at our past on atheism, because all we can look back to is nothing. And so we're coming up empty already. So moving forward, and actually you guys can check out my Aries Spears video where I get more in depth into this. I'll just kind of gloss over a couple points. But what about matter itself, right? If anything exists, if God is out of the picture, I'm saying, can you ground morality in the natural world? I'm saying in matter and energy. And I mean, for several reasons, I would say, absolutely not. I mean, just think about it. Let's say that we took you and me, a dog, and like a bottle of water, and we're all in a lab, and some scientists are trying to see how much we weigh, how fast we can move, or whatever it may be, how our elements interact. Moral worth and objective values, objective duties aren't test-tubable kinds of things that scientists can have access to, right? I mean, just think about it. Like, how many units of goodness do I have in my left hand? I'm saying, or how, my left pinky toe, how much justice is in my left pinky toe? I'm saying, how much love do I have in my kneecap? It all sounds kind of silly, but it illustrates the point that moral values and duties, particularly moral values, aren't features of the natural world. They aren't features of matter, if you will. Okay. Another point that we can make is that we think about moral facts, right? That we talked about earlier, moral facts. Moral facts are very different from what we call natural facts. So natural facts are the kinds of things, again, that scientists, can access and, tell us a whole lot about, how much something weighs, how much something is radioactive or not, or whatever. They just basically, natural facts tell us about the world as it is, right? Whereas moral facts are fundamentally different, I'm saying, in that they tell us about how things ought to be. I'm saying, you ought not to sneeze on somebody intentionally if you got the coronavirus. I'm saying, or you ought not to punch somebody in the face for no good reason. Things of that nature. You ought to value fellow human beings. Those are some things about how the world ought to be. Those are prescriptive. Okay, natural facts, again, I'm saying, in terms of things that scientists have access to, those are descriptive. I'm saying, whereas moral facts are prescriptive. I'm saying, it tells about the world how it ought to be. So again, it just kind of shows us that moral facts don't fit snugly in the natural world. I'm saying? As a matter of fact, there's a philosopher by the name of J.L. Mackie, I'm saying, an atheist philosopher, who makes the same argument. And he says that because moral facts are fundamentally different from natural facts in the ways that I've described, if you're an atheist, that gives you good reason to affirm that moral facts don't exist. So he made the argument, therefore, moral facts, objective moral values and duties do not exist for the very reasons that I laid out. Now, I'm aware that you got your evolutionists out there who want to say that, well, we develop in such a way that we value one another. We can rationalize and understand you know, how important it is to value one another and things like that. And so they would put the weight of morality on evolution. And so again, I think you come up empty, you know, once more, because the reality is, if you look at, you know, human history with all of our schisms, isms, and wars, it paints a picture that's pretty bleak. And as a matter of fact, it seems that the broader story of natural selection is that survival of the fittest is the name of the game. Survival is the highest ethic, is the highest moral, if you will. As a matter of fact, let's go into the OG of evolution himself real quick. All right. Charles Darwin, I'm saying he was given actually a kind of a commentary on like the social implications, right, of the theory of evolution. And he's talking during a time, like right during the transatlantic slave trade, right during slavery and all that. He's talking about the relation between Europeans and what he referred to as the savage races, i.e. people that look like me. And he says that at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world, end quote. That's Charles Darwin in The Descent of Man. You know, so here looking at this argument again, I've kind of, you know, glossed through, you know, these types of supports for premise one. And so I'll move on from there. You know, a lot more could be said about it. But I want to move on to two. You know, how can we, you know, give a grounding? How can we give supports for premise two? So I'll be kind of quick with it. But when you're dealing with that second premise, objective moral values and duties do exist. It really, you want to engage our moral intuitions. You know what I'm saying? Generally speaking, we all have these gut level convictions about what's good, bad, right, and wrong, right? And philosophers refer to these as moral intuitions. Now, when I'm talking about intuitions, I'm not talking about like a feeling or an emotion or anything like that. When moral philosophers are talking about moral intuitions, they're referring to like an immediate awareness or a deeply ingrained knowledge that something is good, bad, right, or wrong. That's what they're talking about when they're dealing with moral intuitions, right? And there's different ways that we can really kind of draw those intuitions to the surface and illustrate why premise two holds weight, right? So for one, I like to do like a thought experiment, right? So real quick. So let's say that you were on a cruise ship, and you know you're on the cruise ship, and the captain comes on and says, "Hey, look, I got bad news, y'all. We don't have enough fuel to make it to where we're trying to go, but I've got good news that we've got a solution. What we can do is we can either throw 25 chairs overboard or 25 passengers. Now I'm going to leave it up to y'all what you want to do, but either way, I'm cool with it. I'm gonna let y'all decide." Now, if the captain says that, and then you turn to your left, and old boy next to you starts chucking people into the water, I mean, it'd be rational for you to say, like, hold up, bro. Like, you know, you're making the wrong decision here. Like, throw the chairs overboard. Why? Because we know that people are more valuable than chairs, right? You haven't done any moral harm or moral wrong to a chair if you throw it into the water. Whereas if you're throwing people into water, obviously you're taking people's lives. I'm saying there's something fundamentally that strikes us as wrong about that. You see what I'm saying? And so given that, you know, it's rational to throw the chairs overboard rather than the people, you know, then I mean, that really speaks to those moral intuitions affirming premise two, that there are objective moral values and duties. Now, lest we think that that's some sort of hypothetical situation, lest we think that, I want to talk about the ZONG massacre very briefly. I'm saying I'm not going to go into all of it, but actually, you know, in September 6th, I want to say, of 1781, there was this slave ship called the ZONG, right? And long story short, the owner of the ZONG, his name was James Gregson. He had 400 enslaved persons on board, and before they left, he insured them as cargo, so to speak, right? Now, as the ship goes along, they find themselves a couple months later off track and with less water than they needed. And so the captain of the ship, his name was Collingwood, he made a fateful decision. Some of his crew was getting sick, and some of the slaves were getting sick, and you know they knew they weren't going to make it to their destination due to being so far off course and lack of water. So what he decided to do was say, okay, we're going to throw some of the cargo overboard, right? And so over the course of the next few days, they actually threw, the crew members of the ZONG, the slave ship, actually threw 131 Africans overboard to their deaths. Now, when the ZONG arrived in Jamaica, where they were trying to go, Gregson actually, the owner of the ship and the cargo, so to speak, he actually filed his claim and won in court. I'm saying to receive payment for the Africans that his people had thrown overboard. You know, eventually it was overturned. But the whole point is this, though: if something strikes you as wrong about them throwing those Africans over, you know, into their dooms, basically, then that tells me that you see the merit of premise number 2, that objective moral values and duties do exist, which then leads us to our conclusion that therefore God exists. So man, we've covered a lot, and I know I'm supposed to be camping out, but I want to kind of get through a couple more pieces. Just want to check in. How we doing so far? We rocking with it? Okay, cool. So I want to have at least 10 minutes of questions, but before I get there, I want to knock out a couple more quotes. All right, I'm going to kind of breeze through. So now that we've gone through the moral argument, right? So we've got a piece of evidence, that God exists, but then also we can use that to illustrate how, in the absence of God, we can use that line of reason to show how atheism really doesn't have anything for us to offer us with respect to morality. Now, I want to cover a couple different quotes. So you just kind of give you some different flavors of the moral argument. So you kind of see how they all kind of work together. All right. So this is from a quotation from a guy named Reverend Leonard Black. I'm saying he was an escaped slave, an abolitionist, and so forth. And he's making an argument that it's improper to sell men as slaves. Right. And at the end of his argument, he says something very interesting. He says that, he's referring to enslaved persons. He says, has he not within him the spark of pure divinity, which when he is surrounded by high and ennobling influences is fanned into a light so bright as to lead us to respond to the glorious truth that man is indeed made in the image of God? Do you speak of selling a man? You might as well talk of selling immortality or sunshine. That's bars right there. You know what I'm saying? But basically, he's grounding human value in God, in that image of God, the Imago Dei, which, Tru-ID, that's what I'm all about. So that gives us, grounds to make a different formulation of the moral argument, what I call the argument from human value. If God does not exist, then objective human value does not exist. Premise 2, human beings possess objective human value, therefore God exists. And you can kind of see how it flows just like that, the first moral argument that we gave, but this is just kind of a different flavor of it, And one thing I like about this version of the argument that I think it really captures the heart of African-American history. I mean, when you think about, everything from slavery to, Jim Crow, lynchings, redlining, whatever you want to think of in terms of oppression over here in the West, it all really boils down to a fundamental question. It can be summed up, I think, in one question, which is, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to have human dignity? And so I think that argument, really brings that out well. Another one I want to show you real quick is I want to show a quote from my man J.W. Le Guin. He was another abolitionist. He says, it is actually in a speech that he gave called "I Am a Fugitive Slave," responding to the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850. And he says, I owe my freedom to the God who made me and who stirred me to claim it against all other beings in God's universe. Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. But I just want to think about, he's basically grounding his rights to freedom in God. And so he's saying that folks who are infringing upon that right, really, they've got God to deal with because his freedom is derived from God and they ought to respect it, given that's, God being the moral authority there. Right. And so that gives us opportunity to make another argument, another version of the moral argument. Okay, which I call the modified moral argument. Now, I'm kind of proud of this one because it's actually my own formulation. I actually, developed this one myself. It says, if God does not exist, then there are no moral facts by which something can be deemed evil or wrong. Right. That's premise 1. Premise 2, some things like chattel slavery on the basis of race are objectively evil or wrong. And then therefore it leads to the conclusion that therefore God exists. Right. Now, one thing I like about this argument is that it's very versatile. I'm saying, notice I highlighted that phrase in premise 2, like chattel slavery on the basis of race, because what you can do with this argument, you can run it, word it as is, and whatever, thing that somebody thinks to be evil, like whether it be slavery, rape, terrorism, something bad in the world, I'm saying, whatever somebody names, you can actually plug it in there and replace that like chattel slavery on the basis of race. You can plug in whatever their objective is and the argument follows, you know what I'm saying? And so it's very versatile when you're in conversation, dealing with, atheists and really trying to, bring them to, or at least get them to see, the biblical worldview and the moral framework they're in. One more right quick. Ooh, man, I'm running up on my time, man. I knew that was going to happen. I knew that was going to happen. Let's see. I want to at least do one more. I'm actually going to skip the next one. I was going to bring my man Frederick Douglass in, but I'm actually going to skip because I want to have at least a couple minutes for questions. So I'm going to skip to actually the last argument. Now, this one is probably not going to make a lot of sense to everybody, you know what I'm saying? But I really want to throw this out there because I think it really brings home what we're dealing with. Okay, so Dr. King, you know what I'm saying, in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, he makes this statement right here, which I think is really fascinating. This is 1964. He says, "I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround him." And then he goes on to talk about how, basically we have a choice. We have the ability to make a change. That's really what he's talking about. But he says, the man he's saying that he can't accept the fact that we're just basically material matter. We're just stuff kind of floating around. Now, here's the thing, though. If naturalism is true, which is a more specific form of atheism, I'm saying naturalism would be that, there's nothing but the natural world. Or we could say maybe materialism. If all that exists is the material world, then I would argue that it actually is the case, that we're just mere flotsam and jetsam, floating through reality, floating through life, so to speak. I'm saying, I'm gonna try to illustrate this real quick, right? First, I want to go back to, let me introduce this concept real quick. Now, look at the bottom of the screen, right? This is that kind of practice deductive argument that I made earlier. I'm saying, I said Adam wears blue jeans every Saturday. Today is Saturday, therefore Adam is wearing blue jeans. Now, what is it about our thought process that helps us to get from step 1 to 2 to 3? I'm saying, and some philosophers refer to that being able to see the connection there and get from 1 to 3 as what's called mental causation. I'm saying, now basically mental causation is basically being able to take the information from a statement, right? And basically that information serves as a stepping stone to get to other thoughts and beliefs. Just like you went from Adam wears blue jeans, today is Saturday, and you got to step 3. So in order to kind of use 1 and 2 there as a stepping stone, that's what they refer to as mental causation. You got to be able to digest the information and be able to move on from there. Now, mental causation is an essential component of our ability to reason. I'm saying, without mental causation, we're unable to reason. Now, I would argue, and I'll try to make this real quick, I would argue that if we're only physical beings, I'm saying, if we don't have a soul, and the only thing that there really is to us is the physical body, then I would argue that we don't have any capacity for mental causation and reason. I would say that because think about it, if we're just matter, then really the story of matter goes back to the Big Bang. You know what I'm saying? As a matter of fact, let me put it this way. Oh, so make sure I have enough time. Okay, cool. I got 3 minutes. I can make this argument. All right. So, think of it this way. All right. So imagine a set of dominoes, set up in a row so that, once the first domino falls, the rest of them will fall. And, the first domino represents the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang, right? And all other dominoes represent physical events that have happened from the time the universe began till now. Now, if naturalism is true, then our universe is like that row of dominoes in the sense that once the Big Bang happens, every physical event after that is like a falling domino, which occurs in like a ripple effect, sort of way, due to the Big Bang. Now, if everything that happens in our mind, if that's the case, then everything that happens in our mind is like those falling of the dominoes. Because if we don't have a soul and we're just the brain, then our brains are physical matter, then the events going on in our brains is just continuance of that domino effect. I'm saying we have no control over it. I'm saying if human beings are nothing more, all physical stuff boils down to matter and energy. And if that's all we are, then everything that's going on in our minds, including our thoughts, beliefs, desires, intentions, and all that, they're all just ripple effects of physical events that happened before them, right? In the same way, So in the same way that the later dominoes in our analogy fall due to the domino in front of them going back to the first domino, the Big Bang, all of our mental activities are caused by physical events in the brain over which we have no control. So if that's if that's true, then in other words, your thoughts and actions really aren't your thoughts and actions. They're just results of physical matter in your brain that your brain is made of, moving about in ways that you don't control. Now, if that's true, then what you believe you're experiencing as mental causation and reasoning towards truth or coming to right conclusions about things is really all an illusion, because your thoughts and conclusions have nothing to do with, truth or what's right, but rather just a product of random physical events happening, going on in your head. Now, that's how the world really is. And now I'm going to tie it into Black atheism, right? The problem of Black atheism. put it this way, being black, in this instance, is an identity claim, right? It's an identity claim that one might, say ties us to a history, a heritage, moral experiences, and so on. Now I can look in the mirror and see that I'm black. I mean, obviously, I'm saying my eyes are going to do what they do to tell my brain, that I'm black, right? I can see that. Let's just say that that's like a physical sensation. I can see it. But being able to tie that black skin to a culture, a people, a continent, historical events, and things like that, the transatlantic slave trade, in order to come to those conclusions about me and who I am and where I'm from, I would have to receive information about that. But see, that process of receiving information and associating these things with myself requires mental causation and rationality that naturalism, and I would go further to say atheism in general, can't justify or account for. Therefore, if I were an atheist, I'd have to admit that I'm in no position to make truth claims about my identity, including being black. And so that brings me to my final argument. I'm gonna leave y'all with this. I know we went through a whole lot of stuff. Here we go. If naturalism is true, then we do not have the capacity to make inferences through mental causation. Step number 2, mental causation is an essential component to rationality. Step number 3, therefore, given naturalism, we do not have the ability to reason toward making truth claims. Step number 4, identity formation is a rational process. Therefore, given naturalism, we do not have the ability to make truth claims about identity. So in other words, for the black atheists, given, if particularly if they believe that the only thing that exists is the natural world, they don't have a soul, they're just physical matter, the black atheist who believes that can't even justifiably affirm their own blackness or any other ethnic identity claim for that matter. So I want to, leave out with this, and then hopefully we'll have a few seconds for questions. The bottom line is, I mean, really, if you think about it, with identity, if you can't establish your own identity, you can't build relationships because you don't know who you are and who you are in relation to others. So then you can't build families, communities, marriages, and so forth. But anyway, bringing it all together, when we think about morality, human value, identity, moral duties, and things of that nature, moral reasoning, in general, that goes back to my 3 points. Atheism presents a false depiction of the way the world is. And in doing so, it fails to account for the essential aspects of human experience that one would need in order to navigate the moral complexities of our people's history. And black atheism can't provide a solid framework for morality and identity from which we could build and move forward as a community. Like I say all the time, you can't build a strong community on the foundation of weak ideas. Therefore, I ain't got time for atheism, man. Ain't nobody got time for that. We ain't trying to rock with it. Okay, so I obviously went over my presentation time. But I wanted to at least get that in there. And I think, we got some stuff to chew on. I want to take a few minutes. Actually, I'm going to just stay in the chat taking questions. I do want to put the link in because you're actually going to go to Vocab Malone's session next. So I'm going to put that link in the chat. Just real quick, I'm going to I'm going to go over some sources that I use for this presentation real quick, and then I'll take some questions. Go ahead and put some questions in the chat while I'm going over these different sources. I just put Vocab Malone's in. So for that last argument, the argument from reason, I use C.S. Lewis's Dangerous Idea by Victor Reppert. Shout out to my man MJ Jackson, because a lot of the moral stuff that I use you can find in J.P. Moreland's Scaling the Secular City, A Defense of Christianity. It's J.P. Moreland. Hey, thank you for the super chats, y'all. I'm seeing super chats in there. I didn't catch all of them because I was looking at my slides, but hey, I definitely appreciate it. This book right here is actually from an atheist. Believe it or not, you can find just about every argument I made by this atheist. His name is Thomas Nagel. This guy right here, Thomas Nagel, he wrote this book called Mind and Cosmos: Why the Materialist Neo-Darwinian Conception of Nature is Almost Certainly False. He wrote this in like 2012. Again, he's an atheist. And he agrees with like everything I said just now in regard to the inadequacies of atheism, right? This guy right here is like the Michael Jordan of atheistic philosophers right now. And he would concur with much of what I said. Also, On Guard. So you can check out On Guard, which is by William Lane Craig. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Free at Last by Dr. Carl Ellis. This is a gem. And if you want a deep dive into morality, the moral arguments and various versions of it and kind of facets of it, definitely. You can't see the title here, but it's actually a book called Finite and Infinite Goods. I'll put all these in the description, but Finite and Infinite Goods. And this is written by a guy named Robert Adams. Whoo. Now take a breath. If y'all don't mind, man, I got to take a swig of this Red Bull right quick. I was trying to jam through as much as I could. So let me see if I can go through some questions. You know, if you got a question, put them in the chat. If you've already put them in there, then just let me know. I'm gonna try to scroll back. Okay. Benjamin Dixon, is the Case for Faith a good resource? Absolutely. Case for Faith, without question. Case for the Resurrection, also by Mike Licona and Gary Habermas. I would recommend that for any apologist. Yeah, very good. Jacob Brown, you say very, very perceptive. You know what I'm saying? I said that my argument is like a contextual version of the free thinking argument against naturalism. Very sharp. That's a philosopher right there. That's exactly what I patterned it after, as a matter of fact. You know what I'm saying? So I just use a different formulation with Victor Reppert's argument for mental causation. But yeah, very, very good, very astute. As a matter of fact, for anybody, also David Baggett and Jerry Walls have a book called Good God. And it basically covers a similar approach to how I approach the moral argument, giving different facets of it. It's what you might call the abductive argument for morality. Good to see people, catching, where I'm coming from in here. My cousin thinks Christianity has done nothing good for the Black community and that it pacifies Black people with forgiveness to be okay with their oppressors. How would you respond? Well, I mean, I've done a lot of that on the show. I'm sorry, this is by Cool Blaze. Excuse me. We got about 9 minutes. I'm just hanging here, y'all. And keep going with the questions. So definitely keep them coming. But this is a good one. So I would definitely recommend. Actually, I'll just put it in the description to make it easier to find. I did a like a 2-hour talk in Bloomington, Illinois. Dealing with this, and also recently in Nebraska. Shout out to Church on Purpose and my man Quentin Rogers in here. Did a talk where I covered some of these kinds of things. But basically, what I would say is, I hate to be. I'm not trying to be mean or sharp or anything like that, but I tell people all the time that most people are poor historians and even worse philosophers. You know what I'm saying? The fact of the matter is that what your cousin is claiming, with all respect to him, if he's in here or not, it's just historically false. I mean, it's just flat out not true. I mean, the reality is there is no worldview that has been more potent in the Western world, particularly in regard to the advocacy of liberty for African Americans and building a community and so forth. There is no worldview that has been more potent in that regard than the biblical worldview. Facts. I'll argue anybody on that. I'm saying to find me something else, but that is a fact. I can, for every one of the quotes that I just gave, we have Christians, Black Christians making an argument toward for their liberty and against slavery and for against and for civil rights and so forth. For each one of those quotes, I could have gave you 10 others. You know what I'm saying? Real rap. As a matter of fact, I've got a talk on YouTube on my channel here called "The Image of God in the Black Experience," where I deal with some of these other quotes. Man, I had like 5 other quotes. I'm saying in my notes I could have dropped just now. I'm saying, and many others. So it's just not true, that Christianity has been a sedative to the Black community. I mean, even if, and now depending on how you want to look at it, some significant slave uprisings came about as a result of people who believe that they had biblical justification for striking out against their oppressors. I'm saying, if you want to put it in Augustinian terms, they felt that they had a just war against the European oppressors. You know what I'm saying? So I would argue that probably the most successful slave uprising in human history was probably from Toussaint Louverture, and it's Haiti, but it was San Domingo, and he was a professing Catholic. I'm saying, so much so that in their original constitution they made Catholicism the religion, like the state religion. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't even practice those pagan religions in public. So he was somebody who held to the biblical worldview and obviously did not take slavery or anything else lying down. And so hit me up in my email. Anybody, I'll put my email in the chat and I can give you some more resources to combat that more directly. So anybody can hit me up, Tru-ID7@gmail.com. I'm gonna try to capture as many questions as I can. Let's see. So okay. All right, let me hide that so I can get back to any more questions. I gotta scroll down to the bottom and see if I miss any questions, and y'all just let me know. But yeah, any other questions? Anybody got anything else that they want to address? Yeah, definitely y'all want to slide over to he said, what's that? Okay, BK Apologist said, what's that Thomas Nagel book? It's called well, the short title is, it's by Thomas Nagel. It's called Mind and Cosmos, or Mind and Cosmos, and the long title is Why the Materialist Neo-Darwinian Conception of Nature is Almost Certainly False. So that's what that is right there. We constantly, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Karma Crump makes a great point. We constantly wrongly perform moral duties, plus we are contingent beings. That's a philosopher right there. Okay. So we cannot be the foundation of moral facts and duties. That's absolutely right. Phenomenal. Very phenomenal. Contingent beings, if moral facts are a fixture of reality itself, and we aren't, then we can't possibly be the source of moral facts, moral values, and objective moral duties. Excuse me, objective moral values and duties, obviously. Yes, that's great to that point. Okay. Can atheists have morals without God? Now, that's an interesting question. Now, and I'm glad you brought that up. So with the moral argument, the argument is not that you have to believe in God in order to have morality. I'm saying, and I'm sure you know this, but I just want to make it clear for anybody who's unsure. But is the fact that there is no morality, period. I'm saying, if God doesn't exist, So whether atheists, believes in God or not, they can perform acts that are morally good. They can exhibit virtues, things of that nature. It's just that nobody can exhibit virtues, perfectly. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're all stained with sin. Our nature is stained with sin. So inevitably we will sin. We will do things that are contrary to God's nature. And thus we all need a savior. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I mean, of course we can definitely do good things from here and there or whatever. Yeah, Alvin Planigan, very good. Shout out to Karma Crunk with that. Yeah, I want to highlight Rox B, point out our next session on Vocab's channel. He'll be dealing with One West Hebrew Israelism. Got about 3.5 minutes. I want to keep rolling with what we got here. Tru-ID apologetics. What would be the main reason atheism is growing within the Black community? Oh, yeah, very good question. So I think one of the main reasons is that traditionally the Black church has been very concerned, if you will, with kind of taking care of its members. I mean, you got to understand that the Black church was birthed out of the context of oppression, slavery, and so forth. So most of its attention has been drawn to dealing with these pragmatic, day-to-day types of struggles, helping the Black community get through these kind of things. I mean, think about the role that the Black church played in the civil rights movement and so on and so forth. But the playing field is changing now. You know what I'm saying? Nowadays, it's not so much about those kinds of concerns. Nowadays, you got different worldviews as different people groups are intermingling. Black atheism is being found to be attractive to folks. And unfortunately, the Black church hasn't been active in equipping itself. That's what we're trying to do right now in combating those kinds of worldviews. And so I think that basically in the absence of us having equipped ourselves, you have Black atheism, I think, flourishing, and really just the problem of evil, like Ari Spears, alluded to. I mean, people are trying to grapple with that and not knowing how to do so and keep God in the picture. I think when I listen to Black atheists, 99.99999% of the time, that's going to be their go-to move. And I think it's because they really haven't heard a biblical defense. I'm saying they really haven't heard a philosophical defense from the biblical perspective. And so we want to try to get that out there. Great question. Oh, got about 2 minutes. I'm gonna try to eat up all of them. Tru-ID, what is the name of the song in your intro videos? Oh yeah, try to find my way. Actually, that's a song. Actually, that's me rapping on that joint. So I'll hit me up on my email. I'll email it to you. Is there, okay, yeah, McGregor, he said, is there a leading voice in the atheism humanism community? Yeah, it's a small voice. It's a small number. I'm saying, but you definitely have some voices out there. I kind of flashed them up on the screen earlier, but you have guys like Anthony Pinn, Mandisa Thomas, Sikivu Hutchison. There's a guy named Cameron. I think it's Cameron Thomas or something like that. I'll put it in the chat later, but he wrote a whole book on it. Then you got some OGs going back in the day. People are dipping back into James Baldwin now and trying to revive some of his stuff. So I'll put a list in the description. That might be helpful if people want to do more research on it. Tru-ID, what can white Christians do to address the Afrocentric ideologies of the conscious community, including Black atheism? And should we? Oh, that's a good question. Is it better to have Black Christians address them? Well, I'm gonna be completely honest. I think that on the one thing, for all of us, the first thing you can do is be a listener. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to jump into those kind of conversations with assumptions in terms of where people are coming from. It's always good to be a listener first and foremost, understand where people are making their objections, and try to, you know, build a bridge through empathy, you know what I'm saying, and understand where people are coming from first. Then they'll be more likely to hear where you're dealing with. And also, I think it's very helpful that if you know people who are in apologetics already of African descent, like myself, ask questions. You know what I'm saying? You know, definitely ask questions so that as you're engaging people, you know, we can kind of give you the inside track on how to deal with these individuals. You know, so that I got to get off. I'm sorry, y'all. I went over my time by like a minute, but actually, hopefully, you've already gone. You know what I'm saying, because you know we're supposed to be starting the new joint over at Vocab Malone's channel on Hebrew Islam. So I'm gonna get up out of here. Love you guys. Thank you for joining me, yo. Peace.